Jesus Christ!
Police race to a suburban house. They've been called by the neighbour of an hysterical man who's cried out for help.
Call the cops!
His wife is dead.
Oh, Jesus!
He was either a very keen dog walker or it was certainly suiting his version of events.
I was at the point where I was not that far off putting him on the ground, handcuffing him and placing him in the rear of the cage truck.
I noticed the glass had popped off the face. This would have taken a lot of force to do.
There was a major inconsistency even at that point in what we were being told. We realised we were dealing with deliberate lies.
I used a number of beer bottles in pig's blood to replicate that same stain.
There's some funny business going on, if you know what I mean.
I never killed my wife. But I loved her and I left home that morning and my wife was alive.
Crime scene examination is all about interpreting a story. Investigators will be told one thing, but the evidence within the scene will tell a completely different tale. When Judith Brown's body was found in the foyer of her home, the art of listening was never so important.
Upon our arrival at the location, first thing we saw was a male person in the front yard. He had his hands up in the air and he had, I could see quite clearly as we stopped, blood down his arms, on his hands, down the front of his jacket. He was quite agitated. He was saying, "What's going on here? What's happened?" I could see blood on the security door handle. It was just sitting ajar and the timber door proper was open. About a metre inside the door I could see a female laying on her back, head towards the door, and her arms were up above her head. There was also some broken beer bottles, appeared to be stubby size, and there's a strong smell of alcohol present inside the house. I went to the gentleman who was still sitting on the seat and I said, "The lady in the house, who's that?" He said, "Judith Brown." I said, "And what's your name?" He said, "Ross Brown." I ascertained from him that it was his wife, and while speaking with him, he had a strong smell of alcohol on him and on his clothing. And I could see he had a laceration to the back of his left hand. The ambulance officers managed to bandage his hand. I had to say to him, like, "Calm down, mate, like, sit down, take it easy. They're here to help you." However, he was still aggressive and quite agitated in his approach with us.
Get out of here, come on, piss off!
I think aggressive would probably be the most apt word to describe his demeanour at that time.
I'm all right, calm down, Billy. I'm all right.
At one point, Mr. Brown became so aggressive he actually approached myself and, placing his face only inches away from myself, was screaming violently at me. I could actually feel spittle landing on my face. Everyone reacts differently to situations where grief and shock are expressed in different ways, and you sort of always make allowances for that, but I hadn't seen this behaviour before. It certainly stood out in my mind.
Get off, Maggie!
He was very insistent upon going back into the house and seeing his wife again. And, you know, I was trying to be very understanding that inside was this man's wife of some 20 years, but for reasons of protecting evidence and things like that, we had to convince him that was not the thing to do.
Judith Brown was laying on her back in the foyer of the premises. She had severe head injuries and there's a lot of low-level blood spatter on the walls. So the deceased was actually about floor level when she received a lot of the impact. Next to Mrs. Brown's body was a set of car keys, a set of prescription glasses and the necks of 2 beer bottles. On one of the shelves of the brick partition, which separated the lounge room from the entry foyer, was a circular stain in blood which appeared to be consistent with the base of a beer bottle.
It was quite evident that she'd been struck with a heavy object. There was nothing in the crime scene other than the beer bottles that would be consistent with being able to strike her in such a manner. So either the bottles had been used to strike the victim or that something had been used on the victim and it had been taken from the crime scene by the perpetrator. I can clearly remember there were bloody footprints on the carpet and there were dog paw prints on the carpet as well and on some of the tiled areas.
The footprints were also found in the main bedroom, where it appeared that a number of drawers and cupboards had been searched.
Initial thoughts were that it was a break and enter, but it just didn't appear right.
Clothing was bundled together and removed from the hangers and placed down on the floor. The hangers still all lined, not as if someone had gone through each of the items individually. Items had also been removed from drawers and placed on the bed in bundles rather than just willy-nilly thrown out, which generally break and enter offenders are discerning as to how they throw items out of drawers. Nothing else appeared to be disturbed. TVs, video recorders, stereo systems, everything appeared to be where it should have been.
The crime scene had been staged to give the impression that someone had been in the house and that had been basically burgling the house at some point. And there was a large amount of passion and hostility that had been present in the scene, and an inordinately large amount of violence used against the victim that indicated much more than a robbery gone wrong.
We also found a piece of ceramic just inside the bedroom door that was stuck down to the carpet with blood.
It was highly coloured one side and had a fracture surface on the other side. It was blood-stained and it was in the immediate vicinity to the assault.
We couldn't see anything that may have belonged to, and of course we started to think, well, is that possibly part of the murder weapon?
And had it struck Judith Brown's watch?
The face had been broken away from the watch, so it certainly appeared that the watch had been damaged during the murder. The time of the watch, I can recall distinctly, as 9:14 and 28 seconds. Even the second hand had actually stopped.
Outside, Ross Brown was still agitated.
From what I saw, he's there, he's got the blood all over him. It could have been a domestic-related incident. It was certainly suspicious. However, he may not have been involved, and as a result of that, he is also a victim of this particular crime.
We impressed upon him that if he wanted us to find out who had done this to his wife, it was crucial for him to assist us with these inquiries. The best option was for him to help us by going back to the police station at that time. Did you have any involvement in Judith's death?
You're fucking joking.
I've got to ask you.
You're fucking joking.
At 9:14 p.m, exactly 12 hours after Judith Brown's watch had stopped, her husband was brought into the police station. The aim of the interview was to commit him to a version of events. At this point in time, Ross Brown was both a suspect and a witness in this investigation.
You're not obliged to say or do anything unless you wish to do so, but whatever you say or do will be electronically recorded and may later be used in evidence. Do you understand that?
I got nothing to hide.
Okay. I arrived at 4:20 p.m. this afternoon, and do you agree that at that time you were fairly upset?
I do.
Also at that time you did also appear very angry. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
And I think you're venting a fair bit of that anger towards other
anybody who was in my sight.
Okay. I asked Ross about the events of that day, his movements, and obviously importantly the movements of his wife Judy. Ross was able to relate to us that it was a day, just the same as any other.
Coffee, Doc?
That after they went through the normal family events of the morning, the three children left the school, and Ross was then alone with his wife Judy. I asked you when you last saw Judith, and you told me at 9 a.m. this morning.
Yeah, around 9. Yeah, around 9 o'clock.
It was at that time that you then decided to take the dog out for a walk.
I done the washing up, like I usually do. I sweep the floors, I make the fucking beds, I do the vacuuming, I do the dusting while my wife's been working, and I haven't.
What did your wife and yourself talk about before you left?
I said I wouldn't be home this afternoon because I would have to take my son to football training.
What time does she normally leave for work?
3 past.
You've left before she decided to leave for work?
I did.
Where did you decide to go?
Take my dog down the beach.
What beach did you take him to?
Local beach.
I'd already been aware that it was blowing a gale. It was bitterly cold and the rain was coming down periodically. To have spent an hour to an hour and a half on the local beach walking your dog in that sort of weather, he was either a very keen dog walker or it was certainly suiting his version of events. He walked the dog down there for an hour to an hour and a half before going to the Anna Bay Tavern around about 10:30 that morning. Now, how long were you at the tavern for?
2-3 hours.
How much would you have had to drink over the whole course of the day from the time you went there to the time
5-6 schooners, roughly. I walked to the bottle shop and I bought myself a couple of large bottles of beer to take. Drove up my driveway. I unhitched the dog, which I usually do. Picked him up, put him on the ground, picked up my beers. I walked over and I proceeded to go to the front door with my beers under my arm.
Okay.
There you go.
Opened up the door, dog went in, and I seen a fucking horrifying thing on the floor.
Jesus Christ!
I grabbed my fucking wife and I fucking screamed. I think I dropped the beer and I ran out the fucking door. I'm not sure if I done anything in the house or not because I was fucking shattered.
You said you bent down and grabbed your wife?
Yes.
How did you do that when you say...
Hollis bolus.
Where did you put your arms?
Mate, I grabbed her and fucking just said, Judy, 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 Judy.
He remembers trying to pick his wife up, cradling her body, and it's possibly at that point that his left hand was cut.
It could have been then, I don't know. And then I just went fucking screaming out the front door. And I went straight to Belinda's and I was screaming at Belinda to ring the police.
Call the cops! Call the cops!
Police had also spoken to another neighbour that afternoon who had also witnessed Ross's behaviour.
Another female neighbour was dragged in by Mr Brown in a headlock, and on seeing the sign she retreated out of the house and vomited in the front yard.
You bastard!
How are you feeling now?
Pissed off.
What are you pissed off about?
The whole works and jerks. I got a wife I don't know what's happened to her. I've been informed that she's not a fucking alive. How would you feel? Would you be annoyed?
Well, that's what I want to know. I want to know how you're feeling.
I'm fucking very, very cranky.
We still didn't know whether he was the offender or whether he was just the grieving husband in shock and angry and trying to vent that somehow. It was a very difficult balance as to how you talk to somebody in that sort of situation, but we impressed upon him that the importance was we had to get a picture of what has happened. What was the situation like between Judy and yourself? Did you argue very often?
No.
You never had an argument last night or this morning at all? Nope. When you had arguments with Judy, what were the arguments usually about? What sort of things?
Oh, I've been with the lady 20 years. Probably just general, out-and-out fucking rubbish.
Was money, that's probably the main cause of most arguments. Was that usually a cause of arguments in your family?
If I said we never had an argument about money, I'd be a bloody liar.
Did you argue about your drinking or things like that often?
No.
Did Judy feel you had a problem with drinking? Have you ever, at any stage in the past, ever hit Judy in an argument?
No.
Has she ever attempted to take any action against you legal-wise for any of those?
No. No.
Nothing like that?
No.
The last question I'm going to ask is probably the hardest one of the lot. Did you have any involvement in Judith's death?
You're fucking joking.
I've got to ask you.
You're fucking joking. No.
Did you hit her at all today? Did you strike her? Nothing like that?
No.
Nothing like that occurred? No argument this morning?
Not at all.
All right. Question I have to ask, mate, in the job I've got. Is there anything further you can tell me about this matter?
No, there isn't.
Now that Ross Brown had given police his version of events, the detectives returned to the family house where his 39-year-old wife had been found lying in a pool of blood. They needed to see whether his story matched with the evidence in the house.
There were paw prints and shoe prints in blood through most areas of the house. A lot of those paw prints and shoe prints were very clear, but a lot of them were indiscernible to the naked eye.
I decided to chemically enhance any bloodstains that were not overly visible. I used an LCV, which is liquid crystal violet, to enhance the bloodstaining. I identified blood-stained shoe impressions, which ended up being shoes from Ross Brown. And interestingly enough, some of these small discrete bloodstains I found in the family room actually belonged to his dog, Floyd. Floyd has walked across the lounge room, into the kitchen area and back around through the lounge to the garage door.
Right next to that door, police found Ross Brown's shoe prints.
Alongside those bloody shoe prints were droplets of blood, which through DNA analysis was able to tell us that it was in fact Ross Brown's blood. It led to the same sliding door that the dog appeared to have exited from, and Ross's blood was also surrounding the locking mechanism on the door. In my interview with Ross Brown earlier that night, that had not been told to me.
There was no real surprise that his prints or blood might be at the scene, but it was where they were found that concerned the detectives.
The fact that Ross Brown had walked through his wife's blood into the main bedroom where the ransacking of the bedroom had occurred was of interest to us.
The footprints indicated that it wasn't once, but twice.
To walk through the blood into the bedroom, then come back out, then to walk through the blood again, and then walk in another direction of the bedroom, and then come back out, shows a very calm person rather than somebody who one would assume should be in a frenzy.
Of even more interest than that was the fact that Ross Brown had then walked through his wife's blood over to that door, unlatched it, and it appeared to allow the dog to run loose out into the yard. That just did not fit in with the picture of somebody that's walked in, found their wife in a pool of blood in the foyer, and then thought, well, I better do something about this.
We seized Mr Brown's white four-wheel drive. It was brought back to Maitland Police Station where it was forensically examined.
In the back tray was a paw print, and we were able to have that analysed, and that came back confirmed as Judy Brown's blood.
What's the dog's name, sorry?
Floyd.
Floyd. Where was Floyd at this point? Did he go around the back from inside, or did he come back out with you? Do you know what happened to him?
I think he was running the street. And they got him back for me.
And he's calling for the dog to get in the back of the ute, which he couldn't do. At some point shortly after that, he's actually lifted the dog up and placed it in the back of his utility.
The dog had been running around the backyard, up and down the street, yet here was this paw print, very distinct and very definite in blood. One would have assumed that blood would have dissipated from the dog's paw as he ran around, yet here it was still very distinct. So had it occurred late in the afternoon when Ross placed the dog in there in the presence of the police, very unlikely it would have been so definite. The question we had to know is, when was that mark made? Earlier in the day or in that afternoon?
The smashed beer bottles were also not fitting into the picture.
The beer glass, it was scattered throughout the living room and the foyer and even into the bedroom. It didn't quite match up with the scenario that he told me about of having just walked in and dropping the bottles spontaneously upon seeing her on the floor there. The other thing that also took my eye straight away was the circle of blood on the dividing wall just inside the foyer. Looking at it, it did appear that it was possible to have been made by the base of a beer bottle. And again, it didn't fit in with any scenario that I had been told by Ross Brown earlier that day.
There was a major inconsistency even at that point in what we were being told. If he'd dropped the bottles immediately, there was no way that ring could have occurred had Mr Brown's account been correct.
It was speculated that the beer bottles could have also been the murder weapon.
During the autopsy, we also discovered that she had an injury to one of her arms where there were a number of scratches. Also adhered to that area were broken fragments of beer bottle glass. And I put forward that the possibility was Judy possibly trying to defend herself against a breaking beer bottle.
The bottle, however, could not have caused the blunt force trauma to Judith's head. The 11-centimetre wound and skull fracture was the result of something much heavier.
Very deep within that wound, two very fine items were found which turned out to be very minute flakes of paint. Embedded so deep within the wound that it was consistent with having been left there by the weapon that was used to cause that injury. So we asked a number of family and friends if they could help us if there was anything that was normally kept in the foyer that would have been consistent with this weapon. From that, a number of persons suggested to us that there was always a concrete doorstop kept immediately in the entry area.
The doorstop was one of a number painted by Judith's mother specifically for her children. Police obtained one, and pieces from it were compared to the fragments found in Judith's wound and the ceramic chip found on the bedroom floor. All were consistent with each other.
We now believe that was the weapon we were looking for.
I've just pushed it open.
Okay, so you swung it open.
Pushed it open.
What did Floyd do?
He's in.
He's already in before you?
He's in.
What did you do? Did you see Judy straight away at this point?
As soon as that door came open, my fucking wife was lying there.
Some 4 days after the murder, Ross Brown agreed to come back to the house to assist us with further inquiries. It was very important to go through that process because there were so many questions from the first interview that we hadn't clarified. And so much of what he told us on that first interview were inconsistent with what we had found at the scene. Ross, if you want a break, you want to take a moment at any stage,
No, that's right.
just let us know.
No, that's fine.
During that interview, Ross went through the processes again of telling us what had occurred.
I walked in here and she was lying there. I'm sure the beer's gone and I fucking jumped onto the ground.
Okay, hang on, you said the beer's gone. What happens?
I've dropped it. Beer's gone. Dog's in here.
Did you see where the dog went? Did the dog go that way? Because, as you described, you got Judy laying here. Did he avoid her and go out of the road, or did he come around here?
Dog's here with us. Dog was in this area, I'm sure of it. He could have fucking took off out there. I don't really know what happened to the dog after that.
All right.
Right.
So when you got back up, you said you don't know what you did. Do you remember going anywhere?
I could have went in there.
Right, then you put into your bedroom.
I could have went in there ranting and raving.
Did you go anywhere else?
I think I've slipped arse over head here like I told you before. I could have stepped back. When I slipped arse over it, I could have gone back.
So the only room you can remember going in is this, the bedroom here?
Yeah. There was shit everywhere. Okay. Sure, there was shit everywhere.
Okay, so you think you ran into there?
Yep.
You ran back out here. Did you do anything with Judy again when you come back out?
No, I don't think so.
All right, just before you've left the house, whereabouts was Floyd? Did you see Floyd?
I got no idea.
All right.
People, particularly that have suffered from a significant trauma like Mr. Brown obviously had if he was a victim, their memory tends to be a little bit hazy. Sometimes it actually improves after a few days. And certainly the idea of the second walk around was to put him in the scene so he had a much better recollection of what had occurred and give him a second opportunity to correct any errors he'd made in his initial interview.
The detectives took him to all areas of the house to see whether it would jog a memory.
No.
Did you come in here and look out there or see anything in the backyard, or you didn't see out there?
I come in that door and I hadn't been at that backyard until this afternoon.
Okay. This door over here.
Yep.
If you looked across, can you tell me whether that was open, closed, half open, whatever?
That would have been quick.
All right, so before you finish up, before you left at 9 o'clock, you locked this up for security?
That would have been locked well before then.
Okay.
That would have been locked before my kids went to school.
So at that stage, you believe this was still locked from
Still
inside?
locked from inside.
Okay. We didn't mention to Ross that we suspected that the Swagman statue was the murder weapon. Now, coming in here, looking around, is there anything in the room out of place, unusual, not where it's supposed to be? We were interested to see his reaction to that and if he identified that to us. Initially, when we went through the house, he did not mention that to us. Just looking over here, so anything missing in this tiled area, this foyer area, anything out of place that's normally kept there?
Should be a doorstop here.
It was when I drew his attention specifically to the entry in the foyer area and asked, was there anything not there that should have been there? He then said, the doorstop's missing. Can you remember where that was when you left that morning on Friday? Was that there?
It was always here.
Anything else missing? Was there any vases, jugs?
There was never nothing kept on here. I've been told my wife never got to work, is that correct?
That's correct.
Her bag,
I believe so.
I haven't seen her bag anywhere.
What's a bag look like?
It's about that big.
When you're doing that sort of walk-through interview back at the scene, you're also very interested in the body language and the behaviour of an individual. I suppose the curious part to a lot of the investigators there, including myself, was the fact that Ross didn't feel uneasy being back at the house.
She was going to work, her bag could have possibly been there because when she's getting ready, she'll do a few things and that before she goes. 90% of the time I'm home when she leaves. I usually go out later, you know. And this was just one of them days.
To myself as an investigator, I just thought this was very removed from a grieving husband.
Ross Brown then took the detectives to the beach where he walked his dog.
Yeah, if I walk in, he'll follow me out and try and come out as far as I can. I ride a longboard.
Yep.
Right in there.
In here?
Yep.
Where he had drunk that day.
A few grogs and that in there, it's pissing down raining.
And bought his takeaway beers.
Come out, I've got 2 large bottles, got in my car and drove out here.
Oh, where'd you get the large bottles from?
That bottle shop.
This bottle shop here attached to the pub. All right.
It was important Ross Brown point out where he drank and bought the 2 bottles of beer. The detectives, however, had been doing their homework, and like the crime scene, what he was saying didn't quite fit the facts.
Ross told us that he went to the tavern about 10:30 that day. He normally stayed, according to the witnesses, for about an hour to 2 hours at the most. This day he stayed for approximately 4 hours. And instead of drinking 3 or 4 schooners, this day we counted on the videotape surveillance that he in fact consumed a total of 12 schooners of Tui's New. The amount that he drank that afternoon was of interest to us because he told us, as did a number of other people, that afternoon he had to take his son for football training more than an hour away. A man that knows he has to do that, to have sat there and drank that much alcohol, I don't think was intending to drive much further than just going home at the absolute outside.
However, the tape did show, and was confirmed by those that were there, that Ross Brown's hand was not cut at that stage. It had to have happened at the time he returned home, supposedly with his 2 beer bottles.
Investigators were able to obtain the cash register receipts for the bottle shop that day. The cash register receipts did not show the purchase of 2 bottles of Tui's New long necks in isolation at any time. And most importantly of all, the video surveillance of the tavern bottle shop did not show Ross Brown entering the bottle shop at any time that day.
And just in case Ross Brown may have gone to another shop up the street, checks were also made there. Again, cash register receipts and video surveillance didn't support his version of events.
By that stage, we realised we weren't dealing with inconsistencies. We realised we were dealing with deliberate lies.
The question was, if Ross Brown had killed his wife, what was the motive?
Put in my watch?
Yeah.
Just what time would it have been that you'd have come home?
Around the 2-ish mark. Could have been a bit either side. I'm not 100% sure of the time.
Okay, I haven't checked exactly the time, but I believe that the first calls to the ambulance and police were around about 3 o'clock that afternoon.
Right.
Does that give you any indication of what time it might have been?
Might have been 2:30, that.
Okay.
It could have even been 20 to 3.
There were so many inconsistencies in his version of events, so many things were able to disprove that he had said. But none of that amounted to enough to be able to charge him or take the matter any further at that time. Extremely frustrating. You know where you're going, but there's not quite enough there.
So police continued to pull apart Ross Brown's story.
You hold
I've got my beer under this arm like this.
Okay, both beers?
Both beers like this.
So take that in
my arm.
Under your left arm.
While they knew he hadn't bought the beer, they still needed to know whether the spread of glass in the crime scene area could have resulted in the way he had described.
I've just pushed it over.
That experiment told us that although some minute pieces of glass could travel some distance, It wasn't consistent with the amount of glass fragments that had bounced away from that scene.
Well, it indicated to us that the bottle hadn't been dropped but had rather been thrown into the ground, which again was an inconsistency in Mr Brown's story.
Investigators then turned their attention to the ring mark on the shelf that was in Judith Brown's blood.
And to try and establish its cause, I used a number of beer bottles in pig's blood, and I was able to replicate that same stain.
And the diameter of that ring was consistent with the base of one of the Tui's new bottles. It was obvious to us that that bottle had been placed in Judy Brown's blood at some point. It had then been placed up on the petition board at a later time, still soaked in her blood, before that bottle was later broken near her body.
Next on the agenda was the watch. From their inquiries, police knew Judith was meticulous, so they felt her watch would tell the right time. But had it stopped at the time of her murder?
When I first examined the watch, I noticed the glass had popped off the face. In my experience, this would have taken a lot of force to do. The hands were bent towards the dial. I noticed the time was 9:14 and 28 seconds. I turned the watch over, I removed the back, then I removed the battery. There was blood inside the watch on the train wheel bridge, the circuit, and the battery contacts. I concluded the battery and watch mechanism shorted almost immediately when the blood was introduced to the watch.
So the time of 9:14 was fairly accurate. She was just about to walk out the door to start work when that happened. Although Ross was firming up as a real suspect, we still had no motive. Initial inquiries tended to lean towards that it was a relatively happy marriage, so we were very curious if he had done this, why? What had caused him to explode to such a degree to cause such injuries to his wife?
So you can just go and sort of, when you're running a bit short, you ask her for a couple of dollars or whatever?
If I say to my wife I want some dough and she would have said to me how much.
We spent months looking into the financial situation of the family, and all of a sudden a picture started to emerge. What we found was that they had a large sum of money tied up in a fixed term deposit. That sum of money was in Judy's name only. Judy's family told us Ross was a spendthrift and Judy had to protect the family's money from Ross for that reason.
I like to punt horses, I like a couple of beers.
But the couple did have a joint account. 6 weeks before Judith's murder, the balance was $12,000.
I can outlay $30 and have a $3 trifecta in every race in Sydney.
By the 1st of June, the day before her murder, Ross Brown had withdrawn the entire amount from that account. They had no financial savings behind them other than the money tied up in the fixed term deposit in Judy's name.
On that same day, Ross Brown contacted the bank. He wanted to know how he could change the fixed term deposit into a joint account. The bank employee told him he would need his wife's authority to do so.
When the inquiry was made as to why he wanted to do that, Ross made the comment, "There's some funny business going on, if you know what I mean." Again, these were things that had not been disclosed to us by Ross in his interviews.
With money as a possible motive, Ross Brown was asked back for another interview.
Why did you ring up on the 1st of June, the day before your wife's death, and inquire about having it placed into two names?
Just an inquiry. Was it possible?
Did you pass a comment because there's some funny things going on, if you know what I mean?
I may have done.
Why would you pass a comment like that?
Well, everyone has an off day. Like you know yourself, like your marriage don't run perfect 365 days a year. I may have had a bit of a bee in my bonnet.
Well, what were the funny things that were going on?
Oh. She might have come home with the shits and been a bit late, and we might have a couple of words, but it was nothing serious, you know. Like, we didn't fight or nothing like that.
So you're saying you had an argument on the 1st of June?
No, we never had a, we might have that. Our arguments went about 10 seconds.
Who normally started the argument?
Well, if I come home from the pub, she'd say, "Oh, you're down there again, blah, 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 blah."
Did you have another discussion like that on the Friday morning?
No.
Before we went out?
I kissed my wife Friday morning before I left. I'm pretty sure I did. And I love my wife.
Yeah.
And I get the feeling here that you guys are trying to tell me that I murdered my wife.
It had now been 4 months since Judith Brown was murdered. During that time, her husband never contacted the police.
We're not talking about the theft of your car or breaking your house. We're talking about the death of your wife, the wife that you love.
Yes.
Don't you think that's a strange thing that you haven't inquired about the investigation or how it's going?
No, I don't.
Right.
In that same time, police had gathered a body of circumstantial evidence. It was now being presented to him.
That day when we found her, she was wearing a watch. What I'll do is I'll just show you a photograph of the watch. It actually says 9:14 and 28 seconds. We believe the watch was broken when Judy was murdered.
Okay.
Possibly from her placing her arms up to try and defend herself. And at some stage she was struck during that altercation. What I'm trying to figure out is the time that you left, will it be 9 o'clock or 9:10. Obviously it's very close to that time.
Yes, I can understand that, Bert.
And that obviously doesn't allow very much time for somebody else to come into the house and assault Judy.
Okay.
Would you agree with that?
Yes, I would.
Do you have anything to say in relation to that?
No, I don't.
What we've also discovered is we believe Floyd has walked through the blood, through the house down here, towards this door over here. Sliding door. He said you latched it back up when you come through. Do you recall that?
Good morning, yeah.
Okay. In addition to those footprints, we've also found footprints that match your shoes that you're wearing that have been marked out by Judith's blood. That after you've been here, you've then walked over this way to this door, and we've got blood that's been identified as your blood on that door and also on that door latch, where it appears that you've disengaged the latch there and possibly opened that door, because we cannot see Floyd's footprints any further after the goes to that doorway. It appears that you've walked over and unlatched that door and allowed the dog to leave.
Well, I may have.
Can you see those small cuts and lacerations?
Yes. Oh, I'll be honest, it looks like bits of glass to me.
There is glass there as well.
Okay, right.
So those, what sort of glass does that look like?
Beer bottles.
What would you say to a suggestion that may have been a beer bottle broken against Judith's forearm?
A beer bottle broken against Judith's forearm. Yeah, well, it's a possibility, yeah.
You said you had 2 bottles that day, Ross.
Yes, I'm sure I had 2 bottles.
We didn't find any more glass from any beer bottles more than the 2.
Okay.
And that's when we disclosed to him that he'd never purchased the beer bottles at the Bay Tavern.
Did you get them out of your fridge at home? Because it's quite obvious, and we can produce the evidence, that you didn't buy them at either bottle shops or at the tavern.
So you told me that now? Well, I'm completely lost for words, because I'm sure I got them at the pub.
He just didn't buy them. The evidence was emphatic that he didn't buy them. He refused to accept that.
I know they got video surveillance there, the whole works and jerks. Mate, I'm positive I bought them there. I might have had 8, maybe 10 schooners or more that day, right? But I'm sure I bought them there.
See, I believe that you've gone home and staged the accident because you already knew your wife was dead.
I did not stage it, Alex. I did not know my wife was dead.
And the reason why I say that I believe you staged it is the fact of the impression, which appears to be the bottom of the bottle, that's left on the top of the dividing wall.
It certainly looks like a mark off a bottle of beer, and I'll admit that myself.
Can you explain how it got there then?
No, I cannot, Peter.
I'll just again show you that photograph there. Judy's arm. Could somebody in a rage with a beer bottle in their hand have struck her across the arm? She's put her arm up to block it.
You're indicating that I done that, Peter. I'm going to say no, I never.
Is it possible?
Peter, I never done that to my wife. Now, I know you've got things here that says the beer bottle wasn't bought there. I am positive I bought it in the bay.
As I said, at the end of the day, the beer bottle, whether you bought it there or not, isn't the main issue. What I'm saying is the whole ambit of what we've discussed with you here today.
I'm going to tell you now, I never killed my wife. And I loved her, and I left home that morning, and my wife was alive.
I don't doubt for a moment that you loved your wife. I don't doubt that one iota. I'll look you in the face and I'll tell you that now. Everyone I've spoken to, everyone I've had contact with, all tell me that. The situation at your house was, you like a drink, you like a bit of a flutter. The arguments that you and Judy did have were all, from what I can ascertain, as a result of you going through money. I think this day that you were going to go out, you were going to go to the tavern and have a few more drinks. I think what's happened in the morning, and I think it's happened as quick as that. I think Judy's had a chop at you, said something to you about, what are you going to do, get out in the piss again while I'm going to work? The frustration's built up in you. And you've said it before earlier in this interview, when you do your lolly, you just explained, I know that you've said that in an earlier interview.
I can keep myself pretty steady. If I snap, I do tend to like to do things I want, and I don't want no one to stop me.
In a very short space, it may only be 10 seconds, I think 30 seconds, that you've done something to Judy, and as soon as it's bloody over, I think you've sat there and thought, my God, what the hell have I done? You're in a panic, you didn't know which way to bloody turn. You go and you say, okay, I'll go to the beach, I'll just get my head together, I'll get my thoughts. You took the statue, you took your dog down there, you've gone to the tavern knowing that's going to be my alibi. And you've sat at that tavern all day praying that someone goes and finds Judy, someone comes from her work, they find her. But that hasn't happened. The time's ticked away and it's got damn close and you knew the boys are due home. I'll give you that, you've had the decency at that stage, I believe, to think, I don't want the boys to go home and find her. And that's when you've gone home. I think, Ross, when you think about it, when you think of everything we've told you here today, I think all points in the one direction. If that is it, that will be mitigating circumstances that the courts will take into account. They will take that into consideration. Because I know, everyone has told me that when you explode, you do it very quickly. I've had a forensic psychiatrist watch your interviews. I'll read you a comment that's been made by a forensic psychiatrist. Just listen to this. Finally, it appears to me that the murder happened in a moment of intensity and rage. There may well have been an element of censure or humiliation taking place at the time, and this would be sufficient for an individual like Ross Brown to become suddenly enraged and behave in a violent and impulsive manner. There is no indication that there was a prolonged fight or struggle, but rather that the whole event occurred ferociously, impulsively and quickly.
Well, can I say something now? I was 100% sure I bought my beer at the pub at Annabelle, and as long as I'm sitting here or I'm alive and on my father's dying oath, I never killed my wife. I'm sorry, Peter.
I don't want you apologising to me, I just want to know what happened. The most frustrating period is when you finish that interview and he's walking out of the station, you're thinking, I can prove all that, I can prove so many lies, but it was just a hair short of being able to prefer any charges.
That hair's breadth came 12 months later.
I was contacted by a counsellor from Nelson Bay who told me that she had been working with one of our witnesses over a long period of time. That witness was in fact the other woman that Ross Brown had grabbed in a headlock on the afternoon of his wife's murder and attempted to drag her back into the scene. What she told me is that she was sitting at home on the morning of the murder and that she had heard an argument from the Brown residence. Although she wasn't able to identify Judy's voice during that argument, she was absolutely positive that one of the voices that was raised was Ross. She told me that she heard a woman scream, but she thought there's simply an argument. She told me that the argument had occurred at approximately 9:10 to 9:15 that morning, and that he had driven off some 10 minutes later. And she was of the belief that, in fact, Ross Brown had actually seen her as he drove off that morning looking through the window. For that reason, she felt that she wasn't prepared to come forward
Importantly, her statement corroborated an earlier one by another neighbour, who had seen Ross Brown's vehicle in the driveway at 9:10 that morning.
This was the final piece we needed, and I sat down and I examined all the evidence that we had gathered in the 18 months since Judy's murder, and I was now of the belief that we finally had enough to charge Ross Brown with his wife's murder.
After a 5-week court case, the jury returned with a guilty verdict. Ross Brown was sentenced to 18 years imprisonment. He is eligible for release on parole in 2017. The ceramic doorstop he used to kill his wife has never been found. Police believe it is hidden here, somewhere in the sandhills of Anna Bay.